Welcome to the Westside Personalized Podcast, where real educators share their classroom-tested, learner-approved personalization practices. I'm your host, Andrew Easton. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion and are able to find a few valuable takeaways from the podcast. And so without further ado, let's go to the pod!
I'm here today with Stephanie Heitmann, which I'm really excited. Former teammate of mine. It really frustrates me that we're not on the same team anymore. But we had really great experiences getting a chance to work together, and I and Stephanie have done some great things with personalized learning in her classroom, and so I'm excited to have her join us today. So kind of introduce yourself, I guess, to everybody.
Thanks, Andrew. Happy to be here. I'm Stephanie Heitmann. I have been teaching here at Westside for 11 years now, and I've taught 9th grade English the entire time. I now, 3 years ago, Andrew and I together with another one of our colleagues created a 9th grade honors course. So that is where a lot of our personalized learning has taken place, which has been really fun.
And so you said you've had fun with it, I guess. That's something that I've found just in talking with teachers. I try to promote that too. You know, I think that's great for students, but it's also good for teachers as well. So when you say fun, what have you enjoyed about it?
Well, it definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone, which I think is always good as a teacher when you're done learning, when you're done teaching. And at first it seemed very challenging to me, and I had a really hard time grasping what it would look like in a classroom, because it felt like with our modular scheduling and with the way our building runs, I didn't know if it would work in the way that it was presented to us. But once we sort of broke it down and chose first to do some lessons and here are some options, and for me it was sort of wading in and not jumping in. It was trying a few things and seeing how that went. And for me, I think the feedback from students pushed me to do more, because when I did try it, they seemed to really respond well to it and seemed to enjoy it. And so it made me think, well, if they like it, like, our job is to do what's best for kids. Even though in some ways it creates a lot more work, I think in the end, when it's successful, it's actually way better for everyone.
So in the front part of that answer, too, you said that there were some kind of early challenges in adapting to, and really maybe just even in wrapping your mind around what it looked like. Yeah. What were maybe some of those challenges or things that helped you to navigate that as you waded in?
Well, I think the first thing for me that was really challenging was the idea of me not being in control a lot. I think that's just like from the traditional teacher standpoint, where you're teaching the lesson and then the students do the activity and then they demonstrate their learning and then you move on to the next thing. And with personalized learning, it pushed me to realize that I don't necessarily have to always be the one talking. And that not all kids have to be doing the same thing at the same time. And so that was kind of hard for me. I know the first time I really did multiple activities that were personalized with our science fiction unit a couple of years ago, I felt kind of lost as a teacher, because here are all your assignments, you pick what you're going to do, you write your goal for today, and then it was like they didn't need me. And then I just felt like I was going up to them and saying, hey, what are you doing? You need some help? And nobody really wanted the help. And so that was hard for me to let go of that control. But I think that one of the things that I learned was that you had to make sure students set a goal so that you could check in with them and see what they were working on, and then I could kind of go in and check their progress and see if they were really doing those things. And
having worked on the team, I kind of understand it myself, but I guess just for people kind of listening in. So when you talk about goals and what you do to help students to set goals and maybe even kind of reflect on that afterwards, what does that kind of look like in your classroom?
So one of the things that I think is really important when you take on personalized learning is making sure students understand the process. And so that was one of the things that we had to set up really clearly was, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and here's how you make it work for you. Like, for example, in our science fiction unit, we had, I think, 3 different formative assessments that students had to complete by a certain date, and they could work on them in whatever order they wanted to, whatever day they wanted to, and they just had to make sure that they were turned in by the due date. To help students kind of know what to do, we gave them a calendar, and we encouraged them to kind of fill in, like, what am I going to read for my sci-fi book? What days am I going to work on which assignments?
Responsibilities that are typical for a teacher.
Right. And so that's part of that control piece, where I'm not telling you what you have to read. I'm telling you when you need to be done with everything, and it's up to you to set that pace. And with freshmen, that was definitely challenging for some of them, because especially with our high ability learners in an honors class, a lot of them are so used to the game of school and just being told what to do, like what hoop do I have to jump through and I'll do it. And so for some of them that was really challenging to break it down on their own and to have to make those choices. And then for some students it was freeing, and they loved not having to do, and they actually got more done because they weren't being told what to do. I think sometimes they just fight the instruction or fight the process a little bit just because they don't like someone telling them what to do. So with the goal setting, we created like a packet, or you could do it electronically or however you want, but students set a goal for themselves. That's a SMART goal, right? So it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable.
Yeah, attainable,
and then time-based, and then results. So that something that they can actually see. So instead of saying like, today I'm going to read, well, that's a goal, but it's not very measurable. Right. And so then you say to them, like, set a goal for yourself. Am I going to read 10 pages today? Am I going to look for 2 quotes while I'm reading that I can add to my annotations? And so for the first couple of days of that, I think students always kind of struggle. They either set their goal way too big or they set their goal way too small. And so then you have to kind of reevaluate at the end of class and say, okay, now look at your goal. Did you achieve it? If yes, did you achieve it like halfway through class? Or, do you need to step up your game a little bit with your goal setting? Or did you bite off way more than you can handle? Do you need to maybe rethink the amount of work that you're giving yourself to do? And I think that is a lot for students because, we as teachers, it takes us a while when we're new to figure out what can you get through in a lesson, in a class period, or the time that you have. And so I think it's good for them to kind of learn about themselves, what they can get done in 30 minutes or 25 minutes or however much time they have that day.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk like process,
Yeah.
Process over product, or
Yeah.
at least equivalent to product, right? That we want to see them turn out good in pieces, but at the same time, the skills you're talking about there translate across content areas, I think.
Absolutely. Like I've had students say that I started setting a goal when I'm working on my math homework or when I'm studying at home. And that's not every student, but for some students, I think it really does help them focus. And then one of the other great things that I take away as a teacher, and I think that's good for students, is to ask students to kind of reflect. Like, did you meet your goal or not? And then think about why. Like, if you didn't meet your goal, is it because you set way too much on your plate, or is it because you got sidetracked by your phone, or is it because you chatted with your friends? And I think what some of them realized was to really focus, they had to put away their distractions, or they had to not sit by certain people. And so I think in that way it's very reflective for students. They learn a lot about themselves so that they can create a better environment. So I think it's teaching them a lot of responsibility, whether they choose to make those right choices. We can't really control that, but we are, I think, helping them get some insight to their own learning style and their own process.
As the students started those pieces, or in any unit, maybe this is your experience too, but you see them maybe dismiss that as a skill until they realize,
Right.
like you said, one, I'm missing this, and
Right.
then two, particularly with the reflective piece at the end, it gives direction to the flexibility of the space. And so sometimes I think in a classroom, like, well, we're going to have flexible seating, you can sit wherever you want, and students don't make good choices and there's no
Right.
accountability. And so I love that in our 5 elements, if flexibility is going to be one, then something like the closure activity that
Right.
English 9 Honors has been able to do gives sort of a, hey, are you allowing yourself to grow in this area
Right.
as a result of this format,
Right.
which is pretty neat.
Yeah, like if you're consistently not meeting your goals, why not? What's the problem? And then you can hopefully then the next week or the next day change something to make it better. And it's also kind of interesting at the beginning when you first start having students write their own goals, how they kind of flounder a little bit, but that struggle, is so great because that's where the learning is really happening. They're learning not only about themselves, but time management and, because they might realize that it's really hard for them to read during class, and they might realize that it's better to do their discussions during class where they have access to their classmates and people who are reading the same book. Or you might see them, they might start working on one assignment for 5 or 10 minutes and then abandon that and move to something else. And I think for some of them it's hard. They're like, well, I set my goal, I have to stick with it. And you have to get them to understand that no, you don't. If you want to switch gears, just hold yourself accountable. And so I even had some students who would like write a list of options. They would make almost like a to-do list each day, and then they might get through all of it, but they might not. But it gave them more options, I think. And for some of them, that I think helped them feel less constrained, even by their own goal setting.
Do you feel like then in the midst of that process, I'm kind of hearing that that's going to change. You have to teach those things in addition to the content, right? Like, what's kind of your experience with that? Would you agree? And to what?
I do. I think that you have to kind of help push kids to where they need to be. For example, our last unit of the year, we did personalized learning in honors with our poetry unit, and this time around, I created a packet, which I know you've done in the past, and so they wrote all of their goals for all, 10, 15 days that we were working through that unit in the same packet. And then every day they would write a goal. They would did I achieve it, yes or no, and then like what helped me or prevented me from that, which I think that part got a little tedious at times. But then, at the end of each week, there was a Friday reflection where they would, here's what I learned about myself this week.
Big takeaway.
That big takeaway. And so for some of them, it was like, I have to have my earbuds and I have to block everybody else out. Or I have to sit facing the wall. Or, I was distracted today because I was worried about my biology test. Or, whatever it is. And I think that's good for them to realize that those external things are gonna prevent you sometimes from reaching your goals. But then what I liked about it was for the first couple of weeks, then each weekend I would look through and give them some suggestions. Like if I saw that they are writing a really terrible goal, very weak or
read 3 pages,
very vague, or like, I'm going to work on my assignments. Well, no kidding. Everyone's going to work on their assignments. So I would give them feedback. And so I think a lot of them would take that feedback. Some of them wouldn't, but you're helping to push them to be better. And I think that's always our goal, right? Is to push kids to be better, but to figure it out a little bit on their own too.
And you had a big piece that you added to the first personalized learning unit this year, dealt with kind of the personality assessment for students. And so I don't know if you could talk just a little bit about kind of that piece, because this was the first time, in my experience with it as well, where we kind of brought that in. We're going to try to develop personalized learning profiles across the district a little bit. And at the high school level, would love that to be something that the students utilize. And I think what you were getting at with that is a really important piece.
Yeah, I went to a conference actually for gifted instruction, for working with gifted students, and one of the things that Dr. Richard Cash had was these learning profiles, and there were 4 different ones, and he had us take the learning profile, and then I thought it would be great to apply it to our students. And then what we did, we gave each student this survey, and then based on their responses, it gives them some insight into what their learning style is. And so that tells them, here are your strengths. Here are things that are going to be challenging to you. And so for that first personalized learning unit with our science fiction unit, we actually came up with some results to give kids. Like we said, okay, so if you are, this type of learner, these are the things that you're going to find really easy, or that are going to be, you're going to feel very confident with in this unit. And then these are some of the areas where you might struggle and you might need to ask for help. And so I think that a lot of them, as I was going through that, they were sort of nodding and thinking, yeah, that's me. And I also think it was great because even though you have 1 or 2 dominant learning styles, I think a lot of them were able to see pieces of themselves in different areas. And so I think that helped them. Like if you're a student who is very introverted and very reflective, like graded discussion might really intimidate you.
Yeah, so I hadn't have to stretch it yet.
And so that's where you can say to students, like here are some other, find some people that that you feel comfortable with and discuss with them. Or if you have students who, are very logical and very step by step, and you give them this assignment with here are the parameters, here's what it has to include, but it can look like whatever you want. That's hard for that kid because they want to see a template and they want to create it exactly like that template, because then they know they can get an A, or then they know that they can check off all the boxes. And so for that student, you have to be ready to talk them through that and say, well, here's some suggestions, like what types of things do you like to make, what types of things are you comfortable with. And so it gives everybody a chance, I think, to be successful with some pieces, but also to push them out of their comfort zone a little bit.